Hi, Dasan, we can start.
Good evening and welcome to today's webinar on ethical decision making for investment professionals. We are delighted to have you join us for this session where we will explore a critical aspect of professional practice. So, without further ado, let me first of all introduce our resource person, our speaker for today's session, Mr. McGillivray. So, it is my pleasure to introduce Richard uh, who is the Senior Director for Education and Product Advocacy at the CFA Institute in the Asia Pacific region. Richard joined CFA Institute in 2013, where he initially led institutional partnerships across Asia Pacific, working closely with financial institutions, regulators, and universities. He brings a unique combination of experience in investment management and professional education. Before joining CFA Institute, Richard established and led Asia Pacific operations for a UK-based hedge fund in Hong Kong. Over the years, he has delivered finance and investment training to a wide range of global institutions, including asset managers, banks, regulators, universities, and professional bodies. Since 2013, Richard has developed deep expertise in ESG and sustainability, with a particular focus on climate-related risk, opportunities, and valuation. His contributions to the field were recognized in 2020, where he received Investment Week UK's Award for Innovation in ESG Education in partnership with PNB Paribas Asset Management. More recently, Richard has been instrumental in advancing CFA Institute's sustainability initiatives. He contributed to the development of climate risk valuation and investing certificate and co-led the launch of the Global Sustainable Investing Community in 2025, which now connects over 39,000 professionals worldwide. In addition, he is actively involved in promoting the CFA program, delivering ethics education, and supporting institutional development initiatives, including his work with CFA Institute's Africa Working Group. Before transitioning into finance, Richard spent 16 years in adult and professional education across Asia Pacific and Southern Africa, working with organizations spanning financial services, government, academia, NGOs, law, and media. Please join me in warmly welcoming Mr. Richard McGillivray. So, welcome, Richard. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dasan, and thank you everyone for joining, which, I hope this is going to be an interesting and useful experience for people. So the first thing I want to say is that you are definitely going to need your telephone for this session. So if you have your mobile phone, that's great. Just make sure you have it at hand because we have a voting system here, which I will explain to you. So I'm just going to start off by sharing my screen. Which hopefully has come across clearly to everyone there. Now, sorry, there's one slide that I'm going to go back on this, if I may quickly. Right. It's amazing how things work earlier, but never later. So let me just, forgive me, I started on the wrong slide. Now, I've titled the session Working Successfully with Ambiguity, and it is an ethical decision-making workshop. But we want to focus on the challenges that investment professionals face with kind of competing demands that get put on them. And some of those demands are ambiguous. In other words, they kind of push you in two contradictory directions. So up front, let me say that this is an active participation workshop. So you'll be voting using Slido. I will show you a QR code for the votes. But I also want to encourage people to unmute themselves and explain their positions. And that is quite a difficult thing to do in an ethical decision-making workshop because people don't want to choose the wrong answers. So let me just set that straight up front. One of the complaints about this session is that there are many possible right answers, and that's why these are ambiguous situations. So what we're really interested in is the perspectives of many people, because it's those perspectives that help us work more successfully, with ambiguity. So now, the slide that I originally had on the screen at the opening, only reason I'm putting it up here is everyone I think in this meeting is familiar with this, but you can see that, ethics is absolutely at the core of CFA Institute, and there are very good reasons for that. And we'll be exploring some of those reasons. We want to protect people's professions. So that's what ethical decision making is ultimately about, is protecting capital markets, protecting people's professions, and most importantly, protecting their clients. So just to kind of talk very quickly about what we're going to do today and what we're trying to achieve. So there are 3 goals for this workshop. The first one is really to encourage people to become more conscious and aware of their thoughts and behaviors. And I think that this is really important. I can say with absolute confidence that some of the decisions that I've made in my career, I would make differently now. So it's really about that. It's about kind of making good decisions. And the best way to do that is to become conscious of our thoughts and behaviors. The second part, and this is really important, is to recognize that these ethical dilemmas, these ambiguities, are normal and predictable. Okay, so you are going to be confronted by them. You probably already have been confronted by them. And then most importantly for our session today is to kind of discuss and practice some approaches for dealing with these ethical dilemmas. And that's why I'm really inviting people at a later point to unmute themselves and to contribute. Remember, there are very few wrong answers and lots of okay answers in these problems and case studies that I'm going to put to you. Now, let's start off with the phones up front. Okay. If you use your phone, please scan that QR code. It's going to take you to a YouTube video. And I'm going to ask you to watch that video. It's just over a minute long. And then I'm going to ask you some questions about what you've seen. Okay, so let's give it a go now. What I'll do is I'll just try and time a couple of minutes. So it's 7:37 now, according to my phone. Yeah, so we'll be back at 7:39. So just watch that video. And let's, we'll come back and reconvene. I'm just going to do it likewise just to make sure that everything works for me. It's working for me. Good luck. Okay, that should have given you enough time to watch that video. So let me just invite people to unmute themselves and tell me what they've seen. So what are you seeing happening in that video? Let's see if we can elicit a response from the group. Again, no right or wrong answers. What are people seeing? Who's going to be brave? Take a step. And I can't see hands up, so I'm just inviting people to unmute themselves and try and answer.
people, they
Thanks,
try
Emma. Go
to
ahead. Yeah,
stay.
thank you.
Yes. So first they try to stay strong and say what he thinks is right, but then he's taken away from the group because everyone else is telling a different answer. So he also want to go with the rest of the team.
Great, excellent. Emma, you've summarized it perfectly. Okay, so what you're
Thank you.
seeing is an example of group conformity. Okay, so exactly as Emma set out, in the first instance, the subject resists the temptation and he gives a correct answer, but very quickly thereafter, he shifts in a very short space of time to giving answers that he knows are incorrect because he can feel the pressure from the group. He can feel the pressure driving conformity. Now that is a very powerful human emotion. There are, roughly 8 billion people on Earth. If we don't get on well together, then we will find ourselves in a very difficult situation, as many parts of the world currently illustrate. So please remember that as human beings, we are hardwired to think collectively. And that creates enormous vulnerabilities in finance, as we will see. Okay, so wonderful response, Emma. Thank you so much. I wish I could send a prize your way. A very helpful contribution. Now, you will have noticed that video is quite old. You'll notice that from the hairstyles, the image quality, etc. So this is something that has long been understood about humans and is still understood to this day. Our societies evolve, AI evolves. There are all kinds of changes that happen, but human genetics is very slow to catch up. So let me now show you what this looks like in financial terms. So what I'm going to show you next is the slides of 3 young men. Okay, what I'd like you to do is just have a look at what's going on in their lives and the reasons that they have given for the predicament that they find themselves in. Okay, so I can call it my rogues gallery, but it should really be called the gallery of ordinary people. So let's start off with Fabrice. Here's Fabrice. Now, he's been found liable on 6 of 7 counts for defrauding investors. And what he has to say is, I was a big team player. If there was something wrong with this transaction, wouldn't people have told me? And when he's saying people, what he's meaning is his colleagues or his superiors. Okay, you'll notice that he's 29 years old. Okay, I wish I was 29 years old, but I think that's material to this. Here comes our second person, Tom Hayes. He's the only trader who was cited by name in the LIBOR investigation. This is post-GFC. On manipulating LIBOR, he had the following comment in his defense. Who was I to question what they were doing? They being other people in his firm. I thought it was weird, but that's how they did it. Within a few months, based on practices at the bank and feedback from his bosses, Mr. Hayes considered it to be part of his job. Okay, and now here is our third person, Kweku from my continent. He's a trader who lost $2.2 billion. He told the jury at his trial, and he was convicted at this trial, senior managers were aware of his actions and encouraged him to take risks. His comment, circumventing the bank's rules, was commonplace, and I only got into trouble because I lost money. All right, so let's take their comments at face value. You can see that these are young professionals, and I'm interested if anyone on the call or in this event has any comments to make about what these people are saying and what they saw in the ASH experiment. Anyone want to comment? Let's go. Who else is brave? Take the plunge. Take the plunge. It's not that bad. And what I'll do is I'll go back. So just to refresh your memories, what connection do you see between the ASH experiment video you watched and the comments that these professionals are making? am I going to have to call someone out? I'm very happy to do that.
Hi, Richard. This
Manju?
is
Ah,
Hi, Richard. This
thank
is
you.
Travis. Yeah, just one. I think one common thing I saw throughout them is that this was sort of like the norm, or it was like what was sort of like the accepted practice at all their workplaces, and all of them just sort of like went along with that and didn't really question what was going on.
Travis, great answer. Okay, and what commonality do you see between the ASH experiment video and that?
I would say, I mean, in the case of like Tom Hayes one, I think even uh, I think the way it played out is very similar, right? He like initially maybe he had some doubts, but then when he saw the feedback of no one else was sort of like seeing what he was seeing, he just decided it was easier to just go with the group.
Travis, it's an excellent answer, and I just appreciate it. Thanks so much for that input. So exactly, you can see the parallels, okay, where young people, according to their version of events, have been led astray, but no one's given them an instruction to do something. In the ASH experiment, no one has said to the subject, you must match the wrong lines. What they've said, that has been told to the actors around them, and the influence that it has had on them has led that subject to make statements that he knows to be incorrect. And similarly, and I love the way Travis put it, Tom Hayes, who's on screen at the moment, he had some doubts initially, but eventually he was just swayed by the group experience. Now, I think this is a very important lesson for us to take collectively as finance professionals. Okay, I think it's quite telling that these are all young professionals. So the seniors who oversaw their actions aren't represented in this deck. And in some instances, were also found guilty of offenses. But the important part is that there aren't explicit instructions here. There's just a feeling, and conformity bias, as we call it, does the rest. So, and there's quite strong research evidence for this. Okay, so there are a number of studies that have shown that situational influences, all right, so the context that you're in, whether that's in an ASH experiment or in a workplace, have more to do with a person's ethical behavior than a person's character. So that's again why I'm going to say, like, when we get into the case studies, please don't feel shy or hesitant to put out your answers or to join conversations about the answers. This isn't about people's character at all, okay? It's about circumstances and situations and what we can do to protect our clients, protect our employers, and protect ourselves as professionals. So just always remember, under the right conditions, good people can be induced, seduced, and initiated to act unethically. All right, this is a human condition rather than an individual failure. And if we look at what are the things that drive people to unethical behavior, there are a number of them. Okay, so firstly, obedience to authority. The institutions that we work in are hierarchical in their nature. All right, conformity with others. We've seen that with the ASH experiment. Incrementalism, which is my personal favorite. I don't drive in Hong Kong where I'm based anymore, but I used to. And my favorite thing was to exceed the speed limit a little bit and then exceed it a bit more and then a bit more. And then eventually you get a fine and then you go back to the speed limit. Now, those little incremental changes, are easy to live with as they keep on going up. All right, so incrementalism, overconfidence. I know what's right. I'm absolutely confident in my perspectives. That's common. And then, of course, rationalization. So I'm doing this because I need to make my targets, or I'm doing this because I need to do it to continue to work here, and I need to put food on the table at home. So remember that rationalization isn't about people doing bad things necessarily because they want to enrich themselves or buy something flashy. It might be that they are in a difficult position looking for ways to support a family member, for example. So those are the real drivers of unethical behavior. And of course, that conformity bias, that second one, and indeed obedience to authority, I think could be argued as well, are just very strongly kind of encoded into us as human beings. So now the question is, how likely are you going to be to ask to be done to be asked to do unethical things or put under this sort of collective pressure to do unethical things. And fortunately, there's some pretty solid research about that. And if you just cast your eye over these two, so you can see that Harvard University, who did research into this question, found that many graduates, so young professionals in this instance, received explicit instructions from their middle manager bosses or felt strong organizational pressures. That's the Ash experiment there, that conformity pressure, if you like, to do things that they believed were sleazy, unethical, or sometimes illegal. So this is going to happen. And then Columbia University took it a step further, and they actually quantified it. So Columbia University study found that 40% of graduates, 4 out of 10, nearly half, had been rewarded for taking some action they considered to be ethically troubling, and then a third almost of those who refused to act in ways they considered to be unethical believed that they were penalized for their choice, compared to less than 20% who felt they'd been rewarded. So this is the reality of modern workplaces and human workplaces, is that there are going to be pressures put on people to do things that are unethical or questionable. And so the question is, what can CFA Institute do, and what can we do as a professional association to support people in the faces of these dual challenges? And the dual challenges being organizational pressure potentially on one hand, and our human nature, if you like, on the other. So CFA Institute has developed an ethical decision-making framework. And of course, our code of ethics and standards of practice is really kind of, where all this is contained in detail. But let's just have a look at the ethical decision-making framework. Now, what I would suggest doing is use your phone to take a quick snapshot of the screen, because you might find this helpful and important when we come back to it. Now, what isn't clear from this slide is that this is a circular process. So the first thing you're going to do when you're presented with an ethical dilemma is ask yourself, what ethical principle is at play here? And I'm going to give you 9 ethical principles on the next slide. Again, ask you to take a photo so we can practice our hand at using those. So the question is, what is the ethical principle? What are our duties? Okay, and remember, our first duty is to our clients. And the reason for that is because it's their money. Our second duty is perhaps to our employer. Okay, I don't know where you want to fit in the legal framework. Okay, and then somewhere further down the list, we have a duty to ourselves as professionals. But the question is, what are those duties? And then what are the key facts? Okay, so what do you really know? And what are the conflicts of interest that face people? And you're going to see many conflicts of interest in the upcoming slides. So once you've done that first quick check, now you must remember that one of the challenges with ethical decision-making is that very often these situations present themselves very suddenly. So if you're the subject in the Ash experiment, you can't sit down and think, what are the principles at play here? What are my duties to other people here? What are the facts here? What can I see? And what are the conflicts of interest? What pressures am I under in this situation? There just isn't time to do that. It's like match the correct line length. So as fast as you can to assimilate those key facts and key features of any particular situation. Then to ask yourself, situational influences, are outside pressures or internal biases, those coming from myself, affecting my decision-making? What are the alternative actions here? All right. And who am I talking to about those alternative actions? And then additional guidance. So one of the things we're going to look at is the key role that compliance plays in this process. All right. Now, when I started my finance career, I think that compliance was really a policeman, sort of avoid and, kind of slow things down, I think is how I viewed compliance. All right. I think compliance has evolved significantly. And in the case studies that we are going to go on to, I'm going to tell you what actually happened and the role that compliance might have played in each one of them, if indeed they did. And then you've got to take a decision and act. All right. And that's what we're going to do today. You're going to be presented with a case study. It's going to be difficult to talk to people about it. Everyone's joining online, but think about what are the key ethical principles? What are the situational influences? And then I'm going to ask you to act by voting. Okay, now just a couple of things to say about the voting system. We collect no data, so I have no idea who's voted for what. The only thing that we're going to show people is the trends in voting, okay? And there's a vote counter as well, so we kind of know how many votes to be expecting. All right, and then the final part is to reflect on what one has learned, all right? So you go through your career, there's a series of events, you know, what actions have you taken and what have you learned? All right, so that is the ethical decision-making framework. If you do a search for it online, you will find it. It is probably one of the most helpfully protective things of clients, people, professionals, and their businesses. So just taking that fractional slowdown to ask yourself those questions. Now, I promised you 9 fundamental ethical principles. These are kind of summaries, okay, taken out of our code of ethics. So, and they're important because they feature in the cases that we're going to have a look at. So again, using your phone, I'd suggest you take a screenshot of the screen so we don't have to zoom back and forth in the presentation. There they are. Okay. First and foremost, clients' interests come first. We've mentioned that it's clients' money that we're working with. Ensure independence and objectivity. All right, now that is, as you've seen from the ASH experiment, extremely difficult to do. So you're trying to achieve a position of independence because, you know, you may act or you may work collectively, but you act individually and you're held individually to account. As you can see from our rogues gallery, 3 young professionals being held individually to account irrespective of what the collective was doing. Third one is avoid and manage conflicts of interest. They're very common in finance, as we will see. Full and fair disclosure relates to providing clients with timeous, accurate information. All right, so no kind of small print that isn't read or confusing terms. Communicate clearly and effectively. Fair dealing means you treating all clients in the same category of client equally. So you don't treat one institutional client differently to others. Okay, so all categories of clients must have the same treatment, fair dealing. Prohibition against using material non-public information. There's some very interesting cases going through the courts in Hong Kong at the moment that relate to that. This time I'll tell you about those. But one is not allowed to act on material meaning information that moves prices. You are not, it's not legal to act on material non-public information. Okay, insider trading is kind of, I think, a loosely bandied about term, as we'll see. There are many iterations of that. Confidentiality, I think we're comfortable with that. Diligence, okay? So in other words, when you're making an investment decision or a client-related decision, you need to have gone through a full process and understood how you arrive at the decision that you've taken. And that is part of exercising reasonable care and prudent judgment as a finance professional. Okay, I'm going to pause there. We're about to get into the cases. Are there any questions that people want to ask? And as I say, please take a quick screenshot of that because you're going to want to be using that. All right, so we're good to go. Any questions? All right, and feel free to just unmute yourself and fire away if there are any as we go. Okay, so case number 1, the gift. Now, I'm going to put it up on the screen. I'm not going to show you the QR code for voting yet. I'm just going to very quickly go through the case as sort of a first example. We'll do the following ones more efficiently. And then I'm going to take you to the screen that has the QR code. Okay, so our first case is called the gift. So imagine that you are a portfolio manager and all of these cases are actual events, all right? We've anonymized them, of course. You are a portfolio manager in the international sector. You travel to a foreign country to investigate investment opportunities for your institutional clients. The management of a large company that you visit and a potentially attractive investment opportunity gives you a very expensive gift. And in this instance, we know what it is. It's a watch. Okay, so this is a company event. You happen to be traveling to the country. It's a very interesting company. You want to meet with the management. They say, well, look, we've got an event tonight. We would love you to come to that event as well. And at this event, you're called up onto the stage and presented with a watch. Now, refusing the gift would be considered an insult in this country and harm the good relations that you've developed with the company's management. So the question is, accepting the gift is option A, okay, because refusing it in the instance would jeopardize an investment opportunity for your clients. B, it's probably okay if you give the gift to charity. Okay, so you take the gift, but you don't keep it. The third one, slightly complicated, probably not okay unless you tell your supervisor you accepted the gift. So in other words, it's okay to accept the gift, but you need to disclose that to your supervisor. And option D is it's just not okay. All right, okay. I think I've read it to you. Here is the QR code. Okay, so scan that QR code. I'm going to do likewise because it's just my best way of checking whether things are working as I expect them to. I did check it earlier, but scan that QR code. Now, before you rush into voting, ask yourself, what are the issues here? What are the influences? What pressures are you under? Should you be doing something? What are your duties to others? Okay, remember your client's interests come first. So give that a few minutes before you start voting. And are there any questions? No problem to ask a question, by the way, or to talk freely. Later on, we will be talking freely. Okay, no questions. All right, well then what I'm going to invite you to do is I'm going to invite you to vote, okay? So select one of those options and try and make it realistic, all right? So, what does your compliance manual say at work? Imagine you in the situation. What do you do? Okay, we've got 10 votes that have come in so far. Feel free to vote. We're on 11 and counting. Fantastic. 12, you can see it in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Okay, let's get a bit of critical mass. Let's see if we can get to 15. Any other votes? All right, okay, those votes are coming in now. Fantastic. All right, well, okay, we'll give people another few seconds. No need to rush like that. Can we get to 20? It's almost like an auction, this. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the voting patterns here, okay? On the initial slides, you'll be able to see them because I've managed to compress the text so nicely, but in subsequent ones, you might have to look at the patterns on your phone. All right, okay. So 50% of our colleagues on the call have opted for it's not okay. Now, I want to interrogate that, all right? So we agreed we've got 9 key ethical principles. The first principle is that your client's interests come first. Refusing this gift appears to be contrary to your client's interests. Does anyone want to comment? You don't necessarily need to have voted for not okay, but does anyone have a comment? Okay, we've got a few late voters coming in. All right. Does anyone want to comment? I have a feeling you're all going to make me work hard tonight. I don't like the sound of my own voice only. So any comments? We've had Travis and Emma. So anyone else? Any thoughts on the voting patterns? Okay, and I can scroll up a bit on the screen maybe. Nope, I can't. But we've got roughly half of people think not okay. The other half of people think it's okay if you tell your supervisor, so you disclose it. There's a tiny group of people who think that one shouldn't at all. Okay, so just oopsie, sorry, forgive me for that. I don't know how to get back there. Let me just try it. There we go. Rescued myself. Okay. All right, so that's our voting. Okay, now I want to use this example as we get into the other cases by just pointing out several things. Like, now we know what happened in this instance. So in this case, the person went onto the stage and accepted the gift. Okay, they couldn't decline it in the instance. But remember, this is the era of social media. And so we have people taking photos of people receiving gifts, et cetera, et cetera. And the majority of compliance manuals, including CFA Institute's internal compliance manual, would not allow you to accept an expensive gift. So that is the ambiguity. You're trying to put your client interests first, but you also are bound by your compliance manual. Now, what happened in this instance is the person in question accepted the gift on stage. When the event was over, they called their compliance officer immediately and they said, look, I've been put in a difficult situation. I was kind of called up onto the stage. I was presented with this gift. It turns out it's an expensive watch. And I'm, just calling you to disclose that and to ask for your assistance. Now, what the compliance team in this instance did is they took the gift when our subject was back at the office. They sold it. They donated the proceeds of the sale to a charity of their choice, and they made the donation in the name of the company who'd given them a gift. They then reached out to the company and they said, thank you so much for your generosity and for your warmth in hosting us. We in order to maintain our independence and objectivity, so that is one of the first things that you've got to ask yourself is, what is the ethical principle here? Independence and objectivity. In order to maintain our independence and objectivity, we are not able to accept gifts like this, much as we appreciate them. So we've made a donation to a charity in your name, and here is the receipt for that charitable donation. Now, it may interest you that a compliance team has gone to those lengths, and it struck me a couple of years ago as particularly interesting that the Singapore government does exactly the same thing with ministers. So if ministers are given gifts in their international travel, they come back to Singapore, they give the gifts to the government, and the government then auctions those gifts and donates the proceeds of the auctions to charity. So this is not an uncommon practice. But the critical thing here, and we're going to tackle this a bit differently with the next case, the critical thing here is identifying the key ethical principles. And the key ethical principles are maintain independence and objectivity, and the compliance team has delivered that, and putting your client interests first. So the person, the professional in this instance, is in this very difficult situation. They make a decision as a result of what's in their client's interest to accept the gift, and they are then supported by their compliance team. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any questions or comments? Let's not be shy. I'm going to have to call out some names, I think, here. Okay, Manjula, do you have any comments or views out of interest's sake?
Not exactly. I think I agree with what you said. I mean,
Great.
if you have said that what is mentioned in the compliance manual, the answers would have been different from the audience. But I think the answers are based on what they believe, not really based on compliance manual.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you. That's a very astute observation. So you can see that we've got 45% of people are voting that it's probably not okay unless you disclose it. In other words, it is okay if you disclose it. So we've got a reasonable conformity on that, and of course we have to remember that conformity bias is our critical issue. Okay, fantastic. All right, so you're ready for the second one. Thank you for your participation. The second case study is called the prospectus. All right, here we go. And I'm going to pause after introducing this one, and we're just going to check the ethical principles. Okay, now Lawrence's employer is an investment bank, and it is the principal underwriter for an issue of convertible debentures by the Courtney Company. And it's important that they are the principal underwriter, because as the principal underwriter, they will need to take onto their books any instruments that are not sold on the market. Okay, so they are the principal underwriter for an issue of convertible debentures by the Courtney Company. Now, Lawrence, who works there, discovers late in the day that the Courtney company has concealed severe third quarter losses in its foreign operations. The preliminary prospectus has already been distributed. What should Lawrence do? Now, before we start, does anyone have any offers on what the fundamental ethical principles here might be? Any offers? Take some guesses in our prospectus. Any thoughts? Just unmute yourself and call it out. Saranga, what do you think are the issues that might be at play here? Saranga, you might be looking for your mute button. Madusha, any thoughts on your side?
Maybe it's full and fair disclosure.
Definitely. Okay, so there is full and fair disclosure here. So, you know, your clients deserve to have accurate information. Okay, now that is critical. So thank you so much for calling it out. Now, what do you think Lawrence should do? And we're going to go into the voting page. Option A is do nothing. It's not your prospectus. You know, keep your nose clean. Option B, immediately report his discovery to his superior in writing and request that a correction be issued. C, immediately report his discovery to his compliance team and disassociate himself from the prospectus if a correction is not issued. And then option D, mention his discovery to his superior and leave the decision about what to do to his superior. Okay, so let's go into the voting page, all right? We've had some help here, so we know what the kind of key issues are. And there are several others, okay, and we'll touch on those as we go. So let's go. Here's the voting page. And you won't need to QR code again, I hope. I'm just wondering, oh, okay, so it's come up on the screen there. It should be available. Okay, we got 4 votes in. Numbers climb to 5. Okay, here come the votes. We got to at least get to where we were, I think. Wonderful. Okay, we're picking up. We're at 12. Let's get back to 19. And don't forget to click send as well. You know, that's something that can happen with Slido. Okay, we're on 15. Do we get any more? Any other challenges? Wonderful. Those numbers are climbing. All right. We've got a couple of reticent voters here. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see where we've got to. All right. So what do you anticipate the voting patterns to be, I wonder? But let's have a look on the screen. Ah, all right. Okay. 53% of people are going straight to the compliance team.
I think we lost Richard. Let me just try sending him a message. See what happened.
Hi, I think we should be used to that post-COVID. I'm not sure, as always, whether that's on my side or other people's, but let me see if we can get back to that presentation. So let me just select a screen to share, and I will try and sort this out immediately. Okay. Share. Okay. Hopefully we can get back to the same place that we were at. All right, please forgive me. If I could just have a comment from Aruna or Racina or anyone who's attending, what screen are you seeing?
We can see Lawrence, the employer.
Yes.
Okay, you can see Lawrence, the employer. Okay. Thank you for that. I just need to work out why I can't see Lawrence, the employer, and I will be back. Please forgive me.
Slide 16. So we can see slide 16.
Okay, all right, thank you. Bonat, I can hear your voice. Thank you for your help. All right. Okay. Let me just see if I can put this. Is the challenge that it's not in full screen mode? Okay. Forgive me, folk. I'm just going to stop the share, try and get the screen sorted out, and I will be back. But in the meantime, we can perhaps answer the question here, what other ethical principles are in play here? So while people think about that, I will hopefully sort this out. Keep the poll active. Yes, I want to keep the poll active. And screen. It's terrible. You feel sort of a bit, I feel a bit anxious trying to sort this out. Just hoping that we're back. But my guess is you're just seeing a white screen now. Okay, Unat, can you tell me what you can see now?
Richard, we
No
just can't
screen.
see any screens, eh?
Beg your
We just
pardon?
can't see. We just can't see any screens, eh?
You can just see you,
No.
Richard, right now.
Okay, just me. Okay, that's very unfortunate. All right, so let me sort the share out. Okay. And hopefully this will allow me to get back to it. Please forgive me, everyone. It's so awkward.
No.
I'm now pretty confident that we have sorted this out. Can anyone confirm that?
It looks like you're
Now
about
we
to
can
share.
see.
Perfect. The prospectus.
Okay, great. So now we just have to hope we can get back to our voting screen. Hey? Let's see how that works. Okay. And we had the voting up. Okay, fantastic. All right, forgive me for that little hiccup. Gave me a heart attack. All right, so the critical issue in this is that what happened in this particular instance is that the person in question opted to go to their superior. They immediately went to their superior and said, look what I've just discovered. And basically spoke to the superior and left it with the superior to take action. Now, the upshot of this was that there was quite a delay before the superior did take action and notified clients that the prospectus that had been issued was an error and there were significant problems with the deal as a whole. And that delay, the compliance team and the bank itself felt had prejudiced clients and put them at further risk. And both Lawrence and their superior lost their job in this instance. And the reason they lost their jobs, in Lawrence's case, the reason Lawrence lost his job was that he didn't go to compliance directly. So as much as that might feel very uncomfortable, it is critical in terms of thinking about how one protects one's clients. You also have a duty to your employer. You don't have a duty to your superior necessarily. Now, given that everyone has, well, the majority of people have gone with option A, which is probably the preferred option, let me ask this question. What does it mean to dissociate yourself from something? Because this is a big statement, and half the people on the call are willing to do that. Can anyone share with me what disassociation might mean? Anyone who voted for that? Am I going to have to call out someone? Rajiv, I'm hoping you voted for that. But any thoughts on what disassociation means?
Hi, Richard. Yes, I did vote for that, but actually, to be very honest, I'm not too sure how I would do that if it came to because it's very. I'm not sure I've seen it in Sri Lanka, so
Sure.
not too
No,
sure
no,
I
no.
would go about doing it.
No, well, Rajiv, that's a great answer. Okay. And I think the critical thing is going to the compliance team. You know, compliance is your partner in business. It's no longer, you know, a policeman to be avoided. Okay. So Rajiv, your vote is a good vote in my view. Now, what disassociation means is it means that you're going to go to the compliance team and you're going to say, I've discovered this. We immediately need to issue a correction. If we don't issue a correction, then I'm going to resign. Okay, so that's how extreme dissociation is. People saying, I cannot continue working here if this isn't corrected immediately. And it's not an attempt to put an employer under pressure. It is just clarifying what you're going to do, because your career is more important to you than this particular instance. And these are the ethical principles that bind CFA charter holders. All right, now let me ask a second question. What is the difference between mentioning this to your superior and sending it to your superior in writing? Who wants to offer a comment on those differences? Umair, what do you think about those differences? Like, what's the difference between telling your superior and putting it in writing? Any thoughts, Umair? There's nowhere to hide on this webinar. Kasun, what do you think? Why would you put it in writing?
When we put it in writing, that we have to kind of
Okay, so it's almost like creating a paper trail. Is that what you're saying, Kasun? If you put it in writing, there's like evidence of the fact that you've taken action. Did I hear you correctly? Okay, Kasun, you're breaking up a bit, but I think I got what you said, and you know, forgive me if I was wrong. So the critical thing here is that compliance needs to be involved, because if Lawrence in this instance, instead of speaking to their superior, had put it in writing, it wouldn't necessarily have changed the outcome for clients, nor would it necessarily have changed the outcome for Lawrence. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize here, you know, because, you know, he may have put it in writing, but the superior may have chosen not to take action as well. So that is always worth remembering. Okay. Are you ready for the next one? All right. Get those voting phones ready. We're on to our next case study. And this one is called the lunch tip. All right. Brad Ames, a well-known and respected analyst, follows the computer industry. In the course of his research, he finds that a small, relatively unknown company whose shares trade OTC has just signed significant contracts with some of the companies he follows. After a considerable amount of investigation, Ames writes a research report on the company with a strong purchase recommendation. While the report is being viewed by the company for factual accuracy, Ames schedules a lunch with several of his best clients, and they include Angie Wong from HIJ, which is a fund. He schedules this to discuss the company. Forgive me for the typo. At the luncheon, he mentions the purchase recommendation scheduled to be sent early the following week to all the firm's clients. Now, the question is, what should Angie do? Now, before I show you those voting, before I put up the voting screen, I need you to ask yourself, what are the ethical principles in play here? What duties do you have? What are the issues here? Okay, and you can go back to those. Yourself and ask a question here if anyone would like to.
Richard, this is Travis again. I think it relates to like fair dealing.
Okay, I think that you're right about that. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm back. Yeah. Okay. I can't imagine what's going on here, why these calls keep dropping. I'm not sure if they're dropping for individuals on the other side as well. All right, so let me just go back to the sharing game. Here we go. Hopefully I'm better at doing this now. Everyone can see the lunch tip screen. That's great. Okay, now we had, and thank you so much, Travis, we had the comment that this is about fair dealing. Quite right, okay. Bradley has many clients. This is a handful of his best clients. Why should they get this information first? Okay, so I think that's a great answer. Any others that people want to add? There's several ethical principles in play here. Let's go. Who else is keen? One more. Let's take one more. Marugia, what do you think? It's terrible when the person running the show calls your name out and you're struggling to find that mute button. So forgive me. Marugia, what do you think?
All clients should be treated equally, and the other thing being confidentiality must be maintained.
Okay, and you're seeing this as a breach of confidentiality because he's letting someone know about the report before everyone knows about the report. Is it in that sense that you mean it? Okay, all right, I'll take that. Okay, all right, fair dealing. I like that. Okay, now what about diligence and reasonable basis? Okay, so if Angie Wong or anyone else at that lunch was to take action on what they'd heard at the lunch, you'll note the sentence, while the report is being reviewed by the company for factual accuracy. Now Bradley is a great analyst, okay, he's respected, so he doesn't often make mistakes, but everyone makes mistakes. Okay, so I'm just putting that out as another potential issue. All right, any others? Marugia, thanks for that contribution. I really appreciate it. Okay, well, let's take us to the voting screen. Okay, hopefully I can get that right. Okay. All right, so here's the voting screen. Take your time, think to yourself, what are the key issues? What should you and should you not be doing? And let's put those in. See where we get. We've got one vote in already. Fantastic. Okay, people are getting into their votes here. We've got 6. And look, these cases do get trickier and trickier, so no problem. Okay, our numbers are climbing. We're at 11. All right, excellent. No one's changing their votes. I noticed that the numbers are dropping off. Let's not have that. 13. Where's our missing couple? There are 24 people on this call. Let's at least try to get a 16. All right. No level of enthusiasm or encouragement on my behalf. Okay, 14. Okay, excellent. All right, let's keep going. And you might think, if you've already voted, you might be thinking to yourself, I wonder what the voting pattern is going to look like here. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, thank you. We're at 16, the magic number. Thank you so much, everyone. Here we go. All right, okay, so 70% of people, now you're not going to see the other vote percentages, but if you scroll down on your phone, you'll see the voting percentages. So we've got 71% of people say do not buy the stock and report that AIMS may be unfairly prejudicing some clients over others. Okay, you've got 24% of people, so a quarter of our voters are saying do nothing until the purchase recommendation arrives. You've got a couple of people who like buy the stock but report Brad. Okay, so that's also a possibility. No one is buying the stock immediately, which is striking because, I suspect that, once that report comes out, this is going to appreciate significantly. All right, so now let's just think about this, okay? Why? So 71% of people are keen on reporting Bradley. Why is it that someone would report Bradley? And this isn't me asking because I think differently. I'm just interested. So does anyone want to offer an explanation of why they might report Bradley? Pramodita, what do you think? You may not have voted for that one, but why might you report Bradley?
Richard, I would think same as the previous Travis mentioned. So it is about the fair dealing. So how we equally respond to all our clients. So because of that, I believe that we do not buy the stock and report that MEs may unfairly handling this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. I mean, I think that is indeed a sound answer. Okay, and it's a sound answer because it's precisely what Angie Wong actually does in this particular case. She leaves the lunch and, feeling a bit devastated because Bradley is a respected and helpful analyst to have in market. She goes back and she reports what she thinks is very unfair treatment. She's also thinking about her duty to her employer. Angie has got the invitation to this lunch, but there's no guarantee that she'd get the invitation to the next lunch. And so there's a competitive advantage, an unethical competitive advantage being created by Brad. And that is, creating difficulty in terms of market operation. Are there any other significant potential ethical considerations here? So I'm just going to take one more. Anything else that is particularly important here and why you might report Brad? Anyone else? I'm going through the list. I should have written notes. Sajini, what do you think? If you can find the mute button. Any other kind of ethical principles at play here? Sajini's struggling with that button. Umair, any thoughts from your side? Chinda, you're going to rescue us. Fantastic. Chindi, sorry. Over to you. What do you think? Chindi, I just saw you come off mute, so I was hoping you were going to offer us any other possible ethical principles in this case. No? All right. Purnima, any thoughts that you've had? We've got fair dealing. Are there any other significant considerations?
Excuse me, I'm sorry about earlier. I couldn't unmute my mic.
Oh, no problem. Sure,
so it's
sure,
just
go for it.
Unpublished information because this is his finding, but this the company have not disclosed any information, so that is also an issue.
Absolutely. Okay, and I'm going to call this one out. Okay, so that if Angie believes that Bradley has only shown this to a small group of people, then that is not public information. And indeed, because Bradley is widely respected and well followed, if Angie were to act on that information, she would have been acting on material non-public information. And just out of interest sake, if anyone wants to do this in a spare moment, perhaps while in transport, look up the case of Seganti Capital, which is currently in the Hong Kong courts. That's Seganti Capital. It's quite a similar case. All right. So what Angie does in this instance is she goes straight back to the office. She reports Bradley. She takes no action. All right. Consider what she does. She protects her clients from potential errors in that report that were undiscovered by Brad. She protects her employer from acting on material non-public information. And of course, that would fall on her personally, but it would also implicate her employer. So there are several kind of steps that reporting aims, achieve. And that's precisely why she takes this course of action. So one has to think also about the integrity of capital markets. We are also sort of, our regulators and our ethical commitments every year also relate to supporting the integrity of capital markets. And so one should seek to avoid any challenges in that regard. So great answers. 7 out of 10 people are on track there. It's a tricky one. Okay, it's a tricky one. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now, the next one has got quite a bit of reading. So I'm not going to read it to you. And what I would like to ask you to do is just read it on your phone. So I'm going to go straight to the voting screen. Okay, so this is the case, and you can see it's quite a bit longer. I'm going to just time and give people, say, 3 or 4 minutes to read it. Forgive me, I think it's going to be easier to potentially read it on, well, you can read it on the screen. So I'll just give people a couple of minutes to read it. Okay, so just sorry to disturb reading and thinking. You're thinking, what are the key ethical principles here? What applies? And I think this is what is useful about this case is that it is an increasingly common dilemma that people face as the use of AI expands. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to the voting screen now. You will be able to see the text, obviously, on the voting screen. But please take another minute or so. I'm just trying to make sure that there's sufficient time. Okay, we've got a vote in. Thank you for whoever took the first step, and then they come. Okay, we're halfway there. Let's target our magic 16. We're getting to 11. Fantastic. Let's keep it moving. Last couple of votes coming in. Don't be shy. Vote and smile. Perfect. Okay, 13, 14. We're nearly there. Get us to the magic number, colleagues. All right. Let's have a look at the voting patterns. Thank you. Those last ones are coming in. Now, you are going to have a look at the voting patterns on your phones for this one. All right. So hopefully those start showing up now. Okay. So what I'm seeing here is 76% of people are voting for all of the above. Some people are saying, what if people say inappropriate if he does not communicate to his clients the continuing updates to the AI model? And I think that's a well-made point. What ethical principle suggests he should do that? The next option, no one voted for inappropriate if he doesn't understand the basis of the AI model's investment and trading decisions. That would be an ethical principle. All right, reasonable basis. If he doesn't understand the output, then he has no reasonable basis. And inappropriate if he does not retain the appropriate documentation. There's also an ethical standard around document and record retention. Standard 5C of CFA, CFA's Code of Ethics. Okay, let's have a few, couple of minutes unmuted here. So I think the majority of people, 75% of people here agree that the correct answer here is none of the above. Now, the question I want to put out to people is, what are the ethical principles involved here? I've given you the record retention one. Are there any other ethical principles in question here? The other one we discussed was diligence and reasonable basis. Okay. So appropriate care and diligence. And then are there any others? I think that 24% of the people voted that they had concerns about the communication to clients, which I think also is evident in this case study. So the question I want to put to you is, how ready are we for AI and investment decision-making, considering the ethical principles that practitioners are bound by, which is reasonable care and diligence, so understanding precisely what the models do, record retention, so the models have to also set out how they reached those investment decisions, and then also how confident are colleagues on the call that where AI is used in the workplace for investment decisions, that is communicated to clients. So I just want to offer anyone an opportunity to unmute themselves and comment before we go into the next one. Any thoughts? Be brave. We all benefit. Am I going to pick someone? No. Actually, I think I am. Here we go. Rihanna, any thoughts on from your side? You know, and the question is, considering the ethical principles at play here, how ready do you think people are for AI being used for investment decisions? Any thoughts, Rihanna, as you look for your unmute button? And I should ask if anyone is keen to rescue Rihanna. Any help for Rihanna?
So,
hi. Yeah.
Hi. So what I think is, especially when we are to use alternative method other than the established and most widely accepted method, we need to inform the client. So it should be the number one. So client, without the client's agreement, with proper documentation, we cannot follow some other alternative method.
Wonderful news. I must say thank you so much. And that's a very helpful contribution. Okay, so the client communication aspect is absolutely critical. And what I want to kind of encourage people to think about is, how you're dealing with reasonable care and diligence at reaching investment decisions and record keeping. And that's not something that people have to answer here. And the two can quite often go hand, or the three can quite often go hand in hand. If one is using black box AI rather than documented AI output, then one is almost certainly failing on all fronts. Okay, so communication with clients is critical in this instance. They need to understand what models you're using. Okay, so this is going to take us to our final case, which is I think a fantastically interesting and tricky one. All right, so here it is. Okay, and this is called Biomed. Now, I've colored the text here in two different colors because they're two kind of parts in this professional's life. Okay, so the blue, you've recently started a new job as a senior portfolio manager at an investment management fund. Now, before this, in your prior job, you were an analyst for a private equity firm. And your last assignment was to analyze Gates. Okay, should be a capital there, a private biotechnology company. Now, of course, in private equity, NDAs, okay, or non-disclosure agreements are extremely important because people are literally being shown company secrets. Okay, so they're extremely important as they go through that full due diligence process. So those NDAs are expected and they are enforced and they are taken seriously. Okay, so before this, in your previous job, you're an analyst for a private equity firm. Okay, you analyze Gates. While doing research on Gates, you learned that the company was completing clinical trials for a vaccine that will prevent a number of diseases. Okay, so that happens. And now back to the blue text at your current job. The analysts on your team at the investment fund tell you that they plan to invest in Biomed, a publicly traded competitor of Gates. Forgive me for the missing capitals. You believe that the vaccine Gates is developing will have a detrimental impact on Biomed. What should you do? Okay, now here are your options. Okay, so you've signed an NDA, okay, and that's evident in the answers, but would be in any private equity due diligence. You signed an NDA, so say nothing because you signed a non-disclosure agreement at the private equity firm. Option 1. Option 2, place Biomed on your firm's restricted list. Now, a restricted list would be maintained by an investment fund. Say, for example, directors of the investment fund or staff of the investment fund may sit on the boards of other companies. So that would be the reason to place a company on a restricted list, because you have access to material non-public information as a board member. So that would be a restricted list. So that's an option. Okay, place Biomed on your firm's restricted list. But of course, if you were to do that, you'd have to give a reason to the people who maintain the restricted list. Option C, discourage the team from investing in Biomed without telling them what you know. Okay, so you somehow discourage them, walk over to their desks and frown and shake your head. Option D, tell the analysts everything you know about Gates. Now, before we go to the voting screen on this, our last case, I want you to just take a minute to work out what are the ethical issues at play here. If you go back to those 9, what are the ethical issues? Any thoughts, Abe? You know, maybe we could do this semi-collectively. What are the ethical issues here? Anyone want to offer? And I appreciate, yeah.
You have certain insider information while you were working in an early.
Excellent. Okay, so Marugia, thank you so much. Okay, so in this instance, material non-public information. Okay, it's definitely material. It's going to move prices, and you have access to it. Okay, all right. Murugia, just a question here. The information that you have relates to gates. It's not actually information directly related to biomed. Okay, does that complicate things? My point being that you have material non-public information about gates and your analysts want to invest in biomed. Do you think it makes a difference? Any thoughts? A tough question. Anyone else can chip in as well. Marugia, no one's coming to your rescue. What do you think?
Yeah, Richard, I think it's
Travis.
still an issue. Yeah. I think still it would be an issue because I mean, his assessment is that this would still have a material impact on Biomed's performance, right? If this information came to light here.
Brilliant. Travis, winning answer. Thank you so much. Okay, so it doesn't matter that they're different companies. Okay. Now, what other ethical principles? Okay, we've got material non-public information. What other ethical principles are at play here? So let's say, for example, that other people in this organization, in the fund management company, they invest in biomed. What is going to happen? Okay, we're going to have to get to voting pretty quickly here. What is going to happen to their clients if this fund invests in biomed and the Gates vaccine is successful? What happens to your clients? Okay, so the answer to that question is they're likely to lose value, okay? And some funds will take a big position, so they may lose meaningful value. Okay, so that's also an ethical principle here. You have duty to clients. So leaving you with that impasse, and in the last 2 minutes, before we turn back to colleagues at CFA Society Sri Lanka, let's give everyone a vote. I can't wait to see how this one gets voted on. Let's go. Our last opportunity to vote. Let's go. I can see them coming in. Fantastic. Okay, we've got 11 votes in so far, 12. Be quite interesting to see what those voting numbers look like. $13. Can we get to, without me totally trashing the time, can we get a 16? I don't think we're going to have time to get to 16 unless people are quick with their fingers. Oopsie. Sorry, that's my fault. Okay. Let us see what the voting patterns look like at 13. All right. Okay. Now, more than half of people here, I think, place biomed on the restricted list. Okay. But you acknowledge, okay, that you would be having to give a reason for that. Okay. And then we've got roughly a third of people, not quite a third, who opt for the say nothing because they've signed, they're honoring the NDA. But of course, the challenge in that instance is that your clients could lose significant value. Scrolling down on the phone screen, we've also got roughly a third of the people who are going with the discourage. Okay. And I kind of, my instinct is to go with discourage, but it's very difficult to imagine what discourage looks like and how successful you would be at discouraging. And then the other issue is that the law around material non-public information is that you may not act, cause others to act or not act as a result of having that information. So technically, you're still in breach of a law there, although I think it would be very difficult to prosecute. So let me wrap up by saying what happened in this particular instance because it's so elegant. So what happened here is the portfolio manager in question went to their compliance team and they said, I'm in possession of material non-public information which relates to a stock that our analysts are covering. And I would like that stock that name put on our restricted list, please. So you can see how simple it is if you use compliance as your partner. There's been no breach of the NDA. All the portfolio manager has said is, I'm in possession of material non-public information. The reason they take that action is because they're thinking about their client's impact, their duty to their clients, arguably to their duty to their employer as well. And they've taken this action without breaching their NDA. Now, what their compliance team has done is they have placed the firm on the restricted list. So there's not even a connection with respect to the NDA between the portfolio manager or anyone who signed an NDA at that firm and Biomed being on that restricted list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up and just let me say thank you so much for voting and participating. Now, we will send the deck out, and the deck will have notes in it. So, for example, in this particular case, it's standard 5A, diligence and reasonable basis. No, forgive me, it's not. It's material non-public information. There's duty to clients, there's duty to employer, etc., etc. So, and they actually contain the references in it that relate to the code of ethics and standards of professional practice. So my wrap up for you today is protect yourself, protect your clients, protect your business, and protect capital market integrity by thinking hard about how easy it is to do unethical things, not because we're bad people, but because we're human people. And we work in complex environments where there are a range of competing pressures, as well as our own innate humanity that has us behave in certain ways. So the questions you should be asking yourself is, what is the ethical issue? Who faces this and who owns the problem? What data is relevant? Can you do this? That's a legal question. Should you do this? That's an ethical question. What ethical principles can be applied? And after the decision is made or the course of action chosen, what have you learned? So just remember the circularity of that ethical decision-making framework. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Before you step off, I'm going to hand back to Dasun, I think it was.
Thanks, Richard. Indeed, it was a very insightful and interactive session. I hope the audience found it quite useful. We have a very few minutes left, so I would like to take maximum use of the time and the great resource person that we have. So I would like to open up quickly for any questions you may have. So please feel free to raise any points for clarification or discussion.
Just a point on the gift case. That was the first case, I guess. I have seen many institutions have policies to accept such gift and hand it over to the company.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, so thank you for that, and I think that goes some way to protecting employees. I think the question probably remains like, does the company feel it can maintain its independence and objectivity in light of receiving gifts? You know, so I think it's an interesting question. And remember that one of the ethical principles is to identify and manage conflicts of interest. And of course, gift giving is one of the, you know, it's inherently conflict producing. Okay, the reason human beings give gifts, you know, if you think about gifts to family members, gifts around weddings, gifts around birthdays, these are the kind of actions that humans take to bind us together with that sort of bond of loyalty and common and, you know, togetherness, if you like. So gifts are risky business, all right? And I think that there are two ways that companies have interpreted them. There's one side where, you know, accepting gifts is just not allowed and thoroughly discouraged. And on the other side where, you know, people can accept the gift and then it goes to the company And, the question is like, does that compromise independence and objectivity, which is a fair question. But thank you for raising that, Barugi, I think it was. So thank you so much. That's a helpful point.
Thank you.
We've come to the end of our time almost. Richard, are you okay to take at least one more question if there are any?
For sure. Absolutely. No problem. And forgive me for running over, those little disconnects
Not at
were
all, guys.
unhelpful.
Let's make the most of it. If any questions or any points that you would like to clarify or discuss?
Richard, this is Travis. I have a question with regard to, I think the penultimate case as you talked about the AI situation, because I think one key issue that I think a lot of these AI models are facing is in terms of that explainability. So,
Totally.
it may be a case where we never actually get to a situation where a model can fully explain. So, their thinking and rational process. So do you think, from an ethical point of view, do you think there always has to be going to be like a sort of like a human in the loop for someone to take responsibility for the decisions, or do you think there can be cases where you can have totally automated like responses from an AI, and that would be acceptable?
Yeah, Travis, it's a great question. It's perhaps the $1 million question at the moment. So I can offer you my opinion, but this is from it's just an individual's opinion. So I think that there has to be a human in the loop for precisely these ethical reasons. At this point, and as far as I can tell, at future stages, AIs are not legal entities. Okay, so it's they're not natural persons. So there's no accountability that can be imposed on an AI model. And so that leaves only the firm. Okay. And then within the firm, there is a person who is ultimately responsible for taking the output of the AI model, unless it's, if it's a quant trading, high frequency trading model, for example, perhaps there won't be a person in the taking action loop, but in many instances there are. And certainly the individuals and the firm itself would remain accountable for decisions, record keeping, etc. But I mean, the reason I included this case is I think it's an incredibly interesting question to be asked about AI. Like, if AI makes a decision, we all know that AI makes errors. Okay, we've probably all experienced that. So the question is like, how does the ethical principle kind of remain in place? And the answer is, in my thinking, that the people who are using the AI model are it's just another tool. Ultimately, the decisions remain with them, and they are therefore accountable for those decisions. But I don't have a better answer than that. I think it's an incredibly interesting space to watch, but it is certainly an argument for why the professional will stay in the loop, and why professionalism matters. And, our code of ethics and standards are absolutely that. It's defining what professionalism is. Those ethical principles that we put on the screen, those 9 ethical, which is sort of a summary of parts of that code. Those are the ethical, those are ethical principles for finance. There are different ethical principles for, sustainability, for example, or, damage that you cause to something. So I do think the individual remains in the loop, which I think, is probably good news for some people's fears. But I think we're going to ultimately see some actions coming through regulators that relate to this. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they get resolved. That's $1 million question, Travis. So it's well done for bringing it up.
Yeah, thanks, Richard, for that.
Thanks, everyone. So as we come to the end of our session this evening, I would like to thank on behalf of the CFA Society in Sri Lanka. First of all, I would like to thank Richard for the insightful discussion. And of course, the CFA Institute for supporting as always and for helping us in making this session today a reality. And last but not least, all of you for your participation. So we hope this session has added value to you and your professional journey. So thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dasun.